Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, carrying on with the Team Associated Rc10 CC build. Bit of an update for you since last video. So, apparently with the knuckles cracking, it's directly down to the thread lock. So I got in touch with MB Models, and within an hour they were in touch with CML, which is the UK distributor. They got straight in touch with Team Associated. They have agreed to send out the new knuckles, and I'll put a clip up of the actual manual where it tells you to thread lock these nuts. Now apparently you cannot use thread lock and let it come into contact with any of the clear plastic at all. Apparently they've updated the online manual, but the second batch of the RCs that's sent out, although we've got some corrections where the body's not getting scratched because it's bagged up properly, the manual hasn't been updated and it still tells you to thread lock them. So any part of this RC that's got a screw or a nut that tightens up to plastic or comes in contact with plastic at all, don't put thread lock on them. Which is, it's a shame because they're now absolutely wrecked, but you live and learn. At least if you're following my video, I have changed the thumbnail of the original one, saying do not use thread lock to come in contact with any plastic. But they're also sending me out the missing E-clip. So thanks ever so much for the guys at MB Models, CML and Team Associated for acting really quickly. It were all took care of within space of about an hour and a half just by email. But yeah, hopefully it doesn't stop me enjoying the build of this, because build wise I've really enjoyed it so far. So let's bring in for a close-up look and crack on. I think we got to number 4, so this will be 5 and then wherever else we end up. Right, so carrying on from part 5, we're going to need this little piece. And apparently we get this little tiny drive pin, and we've got a hole in here, so that should fit through. It's a little bit stiff, but it does go through. Then we've got to place that into here, and it is asking us for thread lock on this, but there's no plastic parts, so we should be good to fit it with thread lock. Then we're going to take this little knot and we've got to tighten it up to it. Let's see if we've got a socket to fit. Yep, so this one is 5/16. So we just need to tighten this up. So that's what you should end up with. You drive pin through it, thread lock on, and just make sure none of this thread lock comes into contact with any of the plastics until it's completely dried. So if you do get any excess, just wipe it off. So let's see what else we've got. Right, so for this bit, not really sure if I'm understanding the instructions perfectly on this, but it does say use a very slight amount of CA glue. So for this part, we're going to put a very tiny amount of CA glue on the pivot gear hole. Then you're going to want to get the longer side, slide that through. Once you've got that slid through, and the instructions aren't the easiest to follow on this, so I believe we are meant to put this tiny little washer on first. Yeah, so once we've got the tiny little washer in place, it will go on. It's just a little bit awkward, and then it shows the way this is beveled down, that this then goes on and clips on, but I think that is misshaped because that's just going to fall straight back off. So if you get the same problem as I have, if you crimp this up a little, you should be able to make it stay in place. And I think for me, once that's on, I would just crimp it up ever so slightly just to make sure it's tight on there. But that is what we should end up with, as little C-clip on or E-clip as CA glue for whatever reason. And let's move on to the next part. Right, for this part we need to fit one of these bushings in. Once we've got that in each gear, you then need to get one of these little snap springs, and these can be tricky if you ain't got the right tools, which at the minute I don't have one, but I usually find with these when I'm working on motorbike putting them on, if you get one side in, you can usually work it round and get it to go in. So that's one of the little buggers in. Let's see if we can get the other one to clip in. So that's got both sides in. It's not telling us to put any grease or anything on any of these, so next step is to get this, and then you're going to put one on from each side. And then all we've got to do then is drop one of these tiny little screws with a little thread lock. So you're going to want a little bit of thread lock on each one of these, and then you should just be able to drop these down the centre. Be able to pop these on and just tighten them up. And it does say in the manual that a little in and out play is normal. So by a little, I think they mean a lot. But that's how we've got it all in place. So we've got our little clip, and that should curve towards the actual plate. You've got your little washer behind it. We've got our bevel gears, and all assembled. So let's move on to the next part. Right, so moving along, next part, we need two of these gears. We're going to drop two of these little bushings in them and just push them down all the way. And then this part is not going to be fun. So we have 4 holes in each one and 8 of these screws, and these are the tiniest little hex head screws that I have ever come across in my life, and it really doesn't feel like this little hex driver they've given you in the kit. It doesn't even feel like it goes into the heads properly. But basically we've got to take 4 of these on each one, and we've got to screw them in to them 4 holes. So let's see how we go on about doing these. And I'm not feeling that drop into that hex head at all. That seems really on the edge of stripping that little hex head out. Why on earth they didn't go for just flathead screws on these is beyond me. And there is no other hex driver with the kit that could fit these. So it really is just going to be a case of just pray that it doesn't strip. and just take your time and go really, really slowly with them to make sure that they are all 8 screw in. And the option you have got is, if you do shear it off, you could cut a flat in it. But yeah, this is just going to take some time. So I'll get them screwed in and then get back to you. So I did manage to get all these screwed down. None of them have sheared off. When you're screwing them down, it does tell you in the manual to do it in sort of a cross pattern. So start there, that one, that one, that one, as you're screwing it down. But I mean, this little thing, just be very careful. It's bent out of shape, but it did work, and I had to file the ends down to finish them off, and we've got no heads sheared off on either of these, although they are microscopic. So really take your time with it, and as soon as you feel them down, stop, because you will shear either the Allen key or the screw heads off. So moving along, we need this assembly back, and then we basically want it facing you, so the side with this sticking out. Then we're going to get one of these and we're going to sit it on, see if we can coax that into place. Then we need another of my least favourite ways of fastening an RC together. I think this car's got most of them, but you're going to want a little E-clip on there, so I'll see if I can get this in shot as I get it on. But if it's going to be a bit awkward, I might have to do it off camera. So basically, if you manage to get it down in between 2 screws, we should then be able to get the nose at pliers just behind it and clip it in. So that's one of those drive gears. Let's get the opposite one on. And I'm going to try and do the same again. So I'm try and get the clip to sit down in between 2 of the screws. And then we should be able to get it on and just clip it into place. So that is up to now one of the weirdest drives that I've ever built. Usually you got the output cup sat in the diff. Not the case with this. They just stuck on bottom of a strangely driven gearbox. But let's carry on, see what else we've got. So we've definitely got some weird bits to do with this. So it's telling us to use the black grease on here. So let's have a look what we've got to put this on with. See if I can scoop a bit out. So we want black grease on both sides of this. This is going to be our thrust bearing. So if we set that on there, we've got plenty of black grease on it. So assembly wise, we get the thick silver washer with the small hole, then our thrust bearing, then a thrust plate. Then it looks like it's asking us to use one of these little plastic inserts inside that actual sort of shim. Once we get that in place, it's then telling us we need to use some silicone grease, but I'm not sure if I've got any silicone grease in here. So it says we need to put this inside here. So just work it around. Then it looks like we drop that in place to sit down onto the little plastic bit. So we may need the larger one in here, but let's see. Then we should put that on. And then once we've got that on, we have that should sit inside it. So it looks like that is how it should all go together, which I kind of get how this drive's going to work. Certainly interesting, but it looks like that's what we should be looking at with it. So let's move on to the next part. So for this, we're going to have to get our silicone grease, and you want to drop it into each one of these bearing holes. Bizarre, this stuff. It kind of looks like you don't have any grease, but it's all sort of stuck to the lid. Doesn't actually look like bad grease though. So it tells us to grease it. I'm just going to try and work some in from both sides, just so I know it's not running dry anywhere. And just because I'm not really going to be running this, I still want it to be built as well as I can. So once we've got a silicone grease in, we're then going to have to get a whole bunch of the tiny little bearings. So you want the side without the sort of injection molded sort of parts, and we're going to get all those bearings one at a time and set them all in. So once we've got all these sat together, we can move on. Right, so moving along, tells us to get our diff ring, and it does warn you not to get any grease on the back of that. Then we're going to get a centerpiece of his diff, and we're going to sit that on. Then we're going to get our opposite diff ring, and that's going to sit in place. We're going to get the outer part, and you're going to sit that down, make sure it's all the way down. Then we want a spring, and then you're going to take the lock nut, and then for this to tighten it up, let's see what size we've got. So it looks like, again on this, it's going to be a 1/4, and then all we're looking to do is just tighten this down so it's perfectly level with the end of the shaft. So you want it perfectly level with top at shaft, and that should give you your diff action. So if you spin it, you should be able to see that the other side rotates the opposite direction. Curious way of making a diff work, but work it does. Not the smoothest feeling of ball diffs, but a ball diff nevertheless. So let's move on. Right, so we've got our diff case, and this is the right hand side. There's a little R written in it. We're going to get this and line it up with the two holes. So if we then get this with the flat to this bottom, so basically it's gonna sort of line up like that, and then that should line up with the two holes, and you should be able to push it together, and the flat should line up with the back of this. Bit difficult to show on camera, but then we're going to get this piece and drop that in. So that's got it all together. Then we should have the left hand part of the case that's going to go over there. So far so good, things are lining up. Then we're going to need our final little bushing, and then this should line up and drop into this side. So if you push it all together, you should get it to clip, and then we've somehow got to get a tiny little E-clip to sit under that, which is going to be fun because there's not really enough room to fit an E-clip. So we somehow got to get that E-clip to sit down in there. So that's got it in. Now I'm not exactly sure how we meant to get it on. Right, so the only way I found to do it was to put a knife blade, standing knife blade down back, and just twist it until it pops into place. But I think it's got hold of it. It looks like it's clipped in. But you can now get a thicker blade behind it just to push it down and make sure it's gone all the way on. There we go. So once it's seated in, that's all fastened up. And this is definitely the weirdest sort of transmission. I can see how it works. It's just a a very, very strange design. It definitely does work as a diff, but let's see what else we've got in store. So moving on, we've got a little bit of foam on each side. Again, a first for me with an RC. Then we have these little parts that it looks like you just push into place and they clip in. So if we do the same on this side, I think this car would be an absolute nightmare if you were trying to race it. If you were trying to service anything at the side of the track or anything like that. So that's now got that one in. Right, so the next thing we've got to do is get a little nut down inside here. So if you just work it inside, and at least with it being clear, you can see when it's all the way down. And then you can screw it out. So let's move along and see what else we've got. So moving along, it is telling us to use thread lock on here. I strongly suggest not to use thread lock because it is going through the clear plastic, and I think it's going to cause problems with the plastic fracturing. So we want the longer screws, by the look of it, go through into the motor plate. Luckily enough, I do have a driver that fits these, or a bigger Allen key than the ones that they give you in the kit. So what I'm going to do is start that one threading in, then move to the next one up, start that one screwing in, then we're going to go to the top, and I'm going to start the threads on this one, and then we've got this one at the bottom with the nut that we dropped in. So if we're lucky and we start threading the short one through, should be able to grab hold of that nut that we put in and just nip it up, and then we just got to tighten these up. I wouldn't go crazy tight with these because the aluminium that this motor plate's made out of, it doesn't feel that strong. So don't use the end as a pry bar. You just need to nip it up. But we should then have a working transmission. with a slipper clutch, sort of diff mechanism, if you like. But yeah, what a weird design. Don't really see any weak points to it though. Quite an interesting design. But I think that's going to be a long enough video for some really awkward parts, and at least we got it all built, and we can see as tiny little horrible screws, and it's really awkward to fit E-clip, and it's not really the smoothest feeling drive, but it is what it is. It does make you appreciate how far we've come with RC, because I can't imagine what it'd be like trying to race this with all this complicated setup, and having to make adjustments or repair something at side of track. I think you'd probably miss the next round or two. But has been really interesting and enjoyable seeing how these older RCs are put together. Be interesting to compare it to some others of this age when we've got it built up. See sort of if it's same or different experience building them. But let's wrap this one up. Weirdest gearbox diff sort of design I've ever seen so far. I never had one of these first time round, but definitely got a new appreciation for the guys that used to race these and try and keep them running. Definitely a bit awkward, but nice that you can see all this weird diff and everything through the clear parts. So yeah, I'm liking it so far. Few bits a bit awkward to follow on instructions, few bits that are a bit weird to assemble compared to any of the modern RCs, but it's kind of got me thinking of what sort of other RCs were out at the time this was, from like Tamiya and some other brands, and were they as awkward to work on? Definitely something worth looking into. But thanks again for watching WTF Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one. Have my socks come off?